My name is Rose. I stood frozen in the luxurious kitchen in Chicago, watching my husband, Ethan, convulse violently on the cold tile floor. White foam spilled from his mouth, his eyes wide but empty. What froze my heart wasn't the death in front of me. It was the truth. The poison had been meant for me. And the accomplice behind it was none other than my own sister, Sophia. I was the owner of a thriving chain of hotels, but suddenly I became prey inside my own home. If you found yourself in this situation, discovering that your husband and your sister plotted to kill you for everything you had built, what would you do? Share your thoughts in the comments, hit like and subscribe to follow the next part where I'll tell you how I turned the trap they set for me into the trap that destroyed them. I am 29 years old, the woman behind a boutique hotel chain stretching from Chicago to Miami and Los Angeles. From the outside, people might think I'm lucky, a career and a happy home all in my hands. But to get here, I had to climb out of poverty, hardship, and sacrifice. I grew up in a small neighborhood on the south side of Chicago. My parents worked tirelessly to raise the two of us, but dinner was often mashed potatoes and scraps of cheap meat. I once promised myself that if I ever had the chance, I would never let my life be limited by such scarcity. At 22, I borrowed a small sum from an old family friend to start my first hotel, an old, run-down building near downtown Chicago with peeling paint and cracked walls. I scrubbed every window pane myself, repainted every wall, and persuaded travelers one by one that this place could be a warm, memorable stay. Ethan, who was only my boyfriend then, often came to help. He carried heavy paint cans, cooked me simple dinners on nights when I stayed up doing the math. Sometimes he held my hand and said, "Rose, you were born to do this. One day your hotel won't just have a few dozen rooms, it'll stretch across major cities." I believed in that love, in that partnership, and I was grateful to have a man always cheering me on. When the first hotel started turning a profit, I opened another in Miami. Blue ocean, golden sun, and boutique rooms with refined designs turned it into a dream destination. I remember so clearly the opening day, Ethan in a navy suit smiling proudly, introducing me to everyone. "This is Rose, the woman who not only won my heart but conquered the hotel industry." Words like that made me feel fortunate. Who wouldn't want a husband who stood by your side, honoring your achievements? Sophia, my younger sister by 3 years, was different. Since childhood, she bristled whenever I succeeded. When I earned a college scholarship, Sophia sneered, "You're so perfect. I guess this family will only talk about you now." I thought it was nothing more than teenage jealousy. I never imagined that feeling of inadequacy would fester into bitterness that grew darker with time. As my business thrived, I bought a penthouse in Chicago, its wide glass windows overlooking Lake Michigan. Family and friends often visited, praising me. "Rose, you're living the dream. Your hotels are booked solid for a year and you've got an amazing husband. You're the definition of success." I smiled each time, though deep inside I still felt a hollow space I couldn't quite name. I thought it was the weight of work, the endless trips between Chicago, Miami, and Los Angeles. Sophia was another story. Every visit, she scanned my apartment with critical eyes, envy laced with disdain. Once, as I walked her through the top-floor hallway of my Beverly Hills hotel, she muttered, "You really do get everything, don't you? Maybe in your last life you saved the world." I forced a laugh, slipping my arm around her shoulders. "Sophia, if I could do it, you can too. You only have to want it." But she shrugged me off in silence. Her eyes were as dark as a storm brewing. I still tried to hold on to our sisterhood. Every holiday I sent her money, invited her on trips, bought her expensive gifts. I hoped my success could be our shared pride, not a wall between us. But the gap kept widening and no luxury could fill it. Ethan often comforted me whenever I felt disappointed in Sophia. "Don't worry. Sophia needs time to find her own way. One day she'll understand how hard you worked for all this." His words soothed me. To me, Ethan was the perfect husband. Gentle, caring, always ready to shield me from envy outside. I had no idea that the very people closest to me were already turning love and blood ties into the knife aimed at my back. After years of happiness and pride, cracks began to show in my marriage. Not through loud fights or icy silence, but through harmless-sounding questions, sidelong glances, and something I couldn't name that stirred unease inside me. One morning, as I prepared files for a hotel meeting, Ethan sat across the breakfast table, his tone casual. Do you think your insurance and documents are enough? If something ever happened, who would run the hotels? Maybe it would be easier if my name were added, for convenience. He spoke as if concerned for my safety. I remember freezing, the coffee spoon halted mid-air. I gave a soft laugh, masking suspicion. You worry too much. Already have a lawyer. If anything happens, the board will take over. Ethan nodded, a flicker of calculation passing in his eyes before softening again, as if my words ended the matter. After that, I began noticing. He didn't ask once, he repeated it casually at random times, during a movie, at dinner, even on weekend walks. It was as if, in his mind, my disappearance from this world was a scenario he needed carefully planned. Meanwhile, Sophia started showing up more often at my house. At first, I was glad she was visiting, especially since work kept me traveling. But that joy turned to unease. Neighbors told me they saw her staying for hours whenever I was away in Miami or Los Angeles. Ethan brushed it off. She came to talk family stuff. You know, she's been down about work. I didn't want to suspect them, but a fracture had formed in my heart. Then my body began to change. At first it was only a heavy stomach in the mornings. I blamed irregular meals, long hours. But soon it grew worse. Stomach pains, nausea, clumps of hair on my pillow. My face hollowed, my cheeks sank, my eyes dulled. I lost nearly 15 pounds in a month without any diet. I went to see our family doctor. After several tests, he shook his head. I can't find a clear cause. Could be stress. Too much work, too much travel. You need rest. I forced a smile, thanked him, and left. But fear had already rooted inside me. I knew my strength. This wasn't normal fatigue. Felt like something gnawing at me from the inside. One evening, after a long trip, I decided to come home earlier than expected. The house lights were on, soft laughter drifting from the living room. I stepped inside and my heart sank. Sophia and Ethan sat close together on the sofa. The space between them was no longer innocent. They whispered something, then froze when they saw me. Ethan jumped up first, his tone overly cheerful. Rose. Back so soon? I thought I wouldn't see you until tomorrow. Sophia gave a faint smile, pulling her hand back quickly, her eyes uneasy. I asked Ethan to help me look over some papers. Just a small matter. I forced myself to appear calm, walked upstairs, leaving behind two faces that still hadn't regained their composure. That night, lying next to Ethan, I couldn't close my eyes. He slept soundly, his breathing steady, while I stared at the dark ceiling, my mind spinning with images and questions. His constant talk about insurance, Sophia's unexpected visits, the unexplained stomach pains, they all began to form a warped, terrifying picture. I clutched the blanket tighter, my heart seized by a fear I had never known. And from that moment on, I knew my seemingly perfect life was sliding off its track, leading me to a place where betrayal and danger lurked inside my own home. After that night, I never slept peacefully again. The unease clung to me like a cold hand gripping my heart, pushing me to do something I had never imagined before: secretly watch my husband. One morning, after Ethan left for work, I opened the desktop computer in his study. I had never been curious about his private work, but this time fear outweighed trust. I searched through his history. The phrases that appeared chilled me: undetectable poison in the body, how to forge a legal signature, transferring property ownership when wife dies suddenly. I gripped the chair for support, inhaling deeply so I wouldn't collapse. All the scattered pieces now connected. The illness, his unusual concern with insurance, and the way his eyes darted away whenever I mentioned Sophia. But I didn't stop there. I wanted to know more. One evening, when Ethan said he had to stay late at the office, I went down to the basement, what he liked to call his private workshop. He had always enjoyed fixing things, making little crafts, so I'd never paid it any mind. But this time I opened every cabinet, every drawer. Behind an old toolbox, I found 3 small glass jars filled with a clear liquid, unlabeled. I opened one, sniffed. Odorless. And then I remembered. The day Ethan poured a strange water into my soup. It looked exactly like this. Next to it, a notebook lay carelessly. Inside, Ethan had written down every detail of my habits. The time I woke up, what I ate for breakfast when I returned home, even whom I met during business trips. He was no longer the husband I trusted, but a cold observer, calculating every move to prepare for my death. I shut the notebook, tears streaming down my cheeks as my hands trembled. I knew I couldn't confront Ethan yet. I needed proof, something undeniable. That was when I thought of hidden cameras. The next day I pretended to have a long meeting and bought 3 tiny cameras, the kind that connected straight to my phone. I hid them in the kitchen, the living room, and the basement. For the first 3 days I saw nothing unusual. Ethan cooking, watching the news, typing on his computer. At times I wondered if I had gone too far. But on the 4th day, when my phone pinged with motion detection in the living room, I opened the feed, and my world shattered. Ethan sat beside Sophia, their closeness suffocating. Sophia leaned in, her voice soft but clear enough through the headphones. "You're sure this won't leave a trace?" Ethan held her hand, answering firmly. "It's a substance that builds up slowly, looks like stress and exhaustion. No one will suspect." Sophia added, her laugh low and venomous. "She's always been perfect. It's hilarious that everyone thinks she's untouchable. A few more weeks and it'll all be over." Ethan gazed at her with desire and said, "Once Rose is gone, we'll be together. The paperwork's ready. Her death will look like nothing more than burnout." I watched them hold hands, then kiss. I bit my lip until blood filled my mouth, my heart crushed. My own sister and my husband sat in my living room, plotting my death like it was a business plan. They kept talking about selling the Chicago hotel to fund investments in California, moving into the Miami penthouse I had bought, living in luxury off the empire I had built with my youth. Sophia leaned against his shoulder. "I've waited for this day so long. Without her shadow, everything will be ours." The camera kept rolling and I knew I had proof. But I also knew my life was hanging by a thread. I had to keep pretending I knew nothing, letting Ethan believe his plan was working. I truly was weaker, my body still bearing the toll of the poisoning, but I decided to use that weakness as my cover. Every morning Ethan brought me a cup of coffee already prepared. He set it on my desk, smiling tenderly like the perfect husband. "You need this for energy. I added cream and sugar just the way you like." I lifted the cup, barely touched it to my lips, then set it aside, claiming busyness. When he turned away, I poured it down the sink. My heart pounded each time, terrified he'd walk back in. But it was the only way to stay alive. At night he cooked dinner. He loved placing the plate in front of me with a look of care. "You need to eat more. You're too thin lately." "I'm worried." I forced a weak smile, raised a forkful to my lips, then slipped it into a napkin under the table. My throat tightened, not from the food but from knowing what it carried. Late at night I replayed the hidden camera footage. Once, Sophia sat with arms crossed, eyes gleaming in satisfaction, her voice dripping with venom. All my life I've been in her shadow. Friends, family, everyone sided with her. I was nothing. But now it's my turn. I lay still, tears soaking my pillow. I had always known she was jealous, but I never imagined my own sister would join my husband to turn envy into murder. The next morning, Ethan served breakfast with his sickly sweet voice. "I think you should take time off. You're too exhausted. Let me handle everything. You just stay home and rest." I forced my contempt down, nodded gently. "You're right. Maybe I should." He smiled, kissed my forehead, his eyes flashing with a triumph I had never seen, believing I was close to collapse. I grew more skilled at playing weak. I staggered on the stairs, clutched the railing, sometimes lost my balance, making him believe the poison was taking hold. In his eyes, I was a woman fading away. One night, I entered the living room to find Sophia lounging with a wine glass, legs crossed. Ethan sat beside her, gazing at her with tenderness. As I approached, they fell silent. Sophia smirked, her tone half joking, half deadly. "You look pale. Work must be draining you. Maybe you should rest sooner than later." I gave a faint smile, forcing my body not to tremble. "Maybe so." Ethan glanced at Sophia, a smirk tugging at his lips. I caught that fleeting exchange and my chest tightened. The following nights, I lay awake, listening to Ethan go down to the basement, rummaging in his secret workshop. I knew he was still preparing. Sometimes I replayed the footage of Sophia and Ethan laughing together, discussing arsenic doses as if it were a recipe. Once, Sophia said with cruel certainty, a bitter smile on her lips, "Soon no one will talk about her as a symbol of success. She'll just be a sad story of a young woman who worked herself to death." Ethan answered, his hand resting on her thigh, "And we'll start fresh. In Miami. Just you and me." I gripped the sheets, tears burning hot. But I refused to drown in despair. I steadied my breath, masked my emotions. I pretended to be weak, to trust, to let them think their plan was succeeding. But deep inside, I was ready to turn Ethan's care and Sophia's venom into the knife against them. The very poison they thought would kill me seeped through every meal, every cup of coffee. But it became the perfect cover for me to build my own trap. That night, Ethan busied himself with tomato soup, its once comforting aroma now suffocating. I sat at the table, gripping the spoon like a weapon. My heartbeat pounded, fear and fury clashing inside me. Ethan turned, his eyes glowing with that familiar tenderness. I made your favorite. You've been tired for too long. Tonight, let this soup warm you. He ladled the thick red broth, steam curling upward. Then I saw it, his hand swiftly pulling a small glass vial from his pocket, pouring the clear liquid into my bowl. It happened fast, but I had been waiting for this. In my chest, a drumbeat thundered. This is it. His phone rang. Ethan frowned, glanced at the screen, then smiled. Sorry, love. Just work. I'll be right back. He set the ladle down, walked into the living room with his phone. The kitchen sank into heavy silence. My body jolted as I stood, hands trembling so hard I could barely move. I inhaled sharply, lifted my poisoned bowl and swapped it with his. Then I placed the untouched one before me. A simple move, yet it felt like fate turning. When Ethan returned, his face calm, his eyes still tender. He sat, lifted a spoonful and brought it to his mouth. I watched every motion, my blood cold. We ate together like any other night. Ethan talked about his busy work, asked about my new hotel project. He spoke, he laughed, and I feigned replies, while all I truly heard was the pounding of my own heart. 20 minutes later, I was washing dishes when a strange sound came from behind me. I turned. Ethan was staggering, clutching his stomach, his face pale. Rose. I'm not okay. His voice broke, sweat pouring down his forehead. He tried to take a step, but his legs gave out. He collapsed to the floor, his body convulsing violently. He clutched his stomach, his body trembling, then collapsed into a critical state. His breaths grew shallow, eyes filled with terror. I stood still, unmoving. My heart tightened, but it was no longer fear. I looked at him, the man who once promised to protect me, now dying by the very thing he had prepared for me. His phone slipped to the floor, the screen lighting up. I bent down and saw a new message flash across. Can't wait to start our life. Tonight it will be over. S. I read it again and again, my hands ice cold. Sylvia. My sister. Ethan groaned, reaching his hand toward me, his voice hoarse. Rose. Help me. I knelt down, staring into his eyes. In that moment he knew he had eaten the wrong bowl of soup. His gaze pleaded, but inside me there was only emptiness. You and Sophia planned to make me the one who died. But now, do you understand what that feels like? My voice shaking with restraint. Ethan opened his mouth, trying to speak, but only choking breaths came out. White foam spread across the cold tile. The smell of tomato soup still lingered, but to me, it was now the stench of betrayal. I picked up his phone, scrolling through earlier messages. Make sure she eats it all. Tomorrow we'll be free. His body convulsed a few more times, then went limp. His eyes stared wide, lifeless, empty. In the familiar kitchen, beneath the warm yellow lights, his death unfolded like a cruel slow-motion film. I sank to the floor, clutching my head. A hollow void filled me. No more fear, no more love, not even anger. The man I once called my husband, the one I trusted most, was dead, by his own hand, by his own scheme. Sophia's message still glowed on the screen. My sister was waiting for the call that I was gone. I wiped my tears, my hand trembling but resolute. How far are you willing to go, Sophia? I gripped the phone tightly, my fingers shaking so badly I could barely dial 911. When the female dispatcher's voice came through, I steadied my breath, turning real horror into the perfect performance. My husband is having some kind of attack. He's seizing, foaming. I think he's been poisoned. My voice trembled, breaking like that of a helpless wife facing tragedy. The dispatcher pressed questions at me. I answered between sobs, forcing out fake cries. Inside I was strangely empty. Ethan was dead, but I knew the real battle had just begun. Moments later, ambulance and police sirens pierced the quiet street of Lincoln Park. Neighbors crowded outside, faces filled with curiosity and fear. I rushed them into the kitchen where Ethan lay motionless. Paramedics checked quickly, then shook their heads. One turned to me, voice firm but soft. "I'm sorry, he didn't make it." I broke into loud sobs, covering my face, letting the sound echo through the kitchen. Inside, I knew I had to play my role flawlessly. Detectives entered. A tall woman with short, sharp-cut hair and piercing eyes introduced herself. "I'm Detective Morgan Rivera, Chicago Police Department. Can you tell me what happened from the beginning?" I fought to steady my breath, speaking through gasps. We had dinner together. Tomato soup like always. About 20 minutes later, he said he didn't feel well, then suddenly collapsed. I've never seen anything so horrible. Rivera nodded, scanning the kitchen. She signaled her team to collect evidence. Samples of the soup, the 2 bowls, the pot on the stove. Cameras flashed, capturing every detail. Another officer asked, "Did your husband have any history of heart disease or food allergies?" I shook my head, my voice raw. "No. He was completely healthy. Just last month he had a full checkup. Everything was normal." Rivera paused her notes, locking eyes with me. That stare felt like it could pierce straight through my act. I swallowed hard, keeping my eyes wet. "Have there been any conflicts between you and your husband lately? Arguments, disagreements?" she asked slowly. I shook my head gently, clenching my hands. "We were happy. He was always caring for me, especially lately when I wasn't feeling well." Bitterness rose in my throat, but I swallowed it. This was a life-or-death performance. Either they believed I was a victim or everything would fall on me. After finishing procedures at the scene, Rivera left me her card and told me to come to the station the next morning for a detailed statement. I pretended to be dazed. When the police left, the house sank into terrifying silence. That night, I sat on the bed clutching a pillow, staring at my phone screen. I knew fake tears wouldn't be enough. I needed an ace, something undeniable. And I had it, the hidden camera recordings. The next morning, I went to the station with my lawyer. Rivera sat across in the small interrogation room, her eyes never leaving mine. After repeating questions again and again, she suddenly said, "Preliminary screening shows signs of a toxic substance in your husband's body. This wasn't accidental. This wasn't accidental. Someone deliberately put poison in the food." I feigned shock, my hands trembling. "Arsenic? Oh my God. Does that mean someone wanted us dead?" Rivera tilted her head, studying every reaction. I let a few real tears fall, fatigue and rage blending into a natural shiver. Then I drew a long breath as if remembering something. "Detective, I don't know if it's related, but lately I've been sick. Stomach pains, hair falling out, constant exhaustion. The doctors couldn't explain it." I started to think, maybe I was the target. Rivera stopped writing, her eyes flashing. "You're saying someone has been trying to harm you?" I pulled my phone from my purse, sliding it across to her. "I set up cameras in the house because I felt uneasy. This is what I recorded." Rivera played the footage. The room was silent except for the voices on the phone. Sophia sitting beside Ethan, her voice clear. "All my life I've been in her shadow. Now it's my turn." Then Ethan pouring something into the soup, both whispering, "Arsenic. Leaves no trace. Just a few more weeks." When it ended, Rivera leaned back, her eyes sharp. "Mrs. Martinez, this evidence changes everything. This was clearly a planned murder attempt." I lowered my head, sobbing loudly, this time with no pretense. Because the pain was real. My sister and my husband had plotted my death together. Rivera nodded, rising. "We'll begin surveillance on Sophia immediately. If you know of any place she frequents or plans to leave town, tell us now." I gathered myself and gave Sophia's apartment address, her workplace and her habits. On the way back from the station, I leaned against the car seat, eyes closed. I knew the game wasn't over. Ethan had paid, but Sophia was still free. Now the police would help me set the trap. 3 days after I turned over the videos to Detective Rivera, my phone rang on a gray morning. A firm voice came through. "Mrs. Martinez, we've arrested Sophia at O'Hare Airport. You should come to identify her and hear the formal charges." My heart pounded. I wasn't surprised, but a chill ran down my spine. The moment I had both dreaded and longed for had arrived. Sophia was caught while checking in for a flight to Mexico City. In her bag was $70,000 in cash, Money withdrawn from one of the hotel's auxiliary accounts I had reserved for emergencies. She could only have learned about it from Ethan. When the police arrived, I was told, Sophia still tried to pretend she was leaving for a vacation. But when security opened her red wallet, they found a small folded note, the handwriting painfully familiar. Once she's gone, it's you and me. Ethan's handwriting. What once symbolized love was now an undeniable confession. When I reached the station, Sophia was already in the interrogation room. Through the glass, I saw my sister, her hair messy, her face worn, but her eyes still burning with fury. She slammed her hand on the table, shrieking, "I don't know anything. This was Ethan's scheme, not mine." Detective Rivera remained calm, laying photo after photo, piece after piece of evidence on the table. Emails Sophia had sent Ethan discussing dosages, forged documents, a fake passport photo under a new name. Then the living room video. Sophia fell silent. Her lips trembled, but her eyes stayed defiant. Rivera leaned forward, her voice low and steady. "Miss Sophia, everything points to you. We have video, fraudulent accounts, even Ethan's love note. How long do you plan to deny it?" My hands clenched. A part of me wanted to rush in, demand, "Why? Why did you want to kill me?" But another part felt utterly drained. I already knew the answer, from her own mouth on that recording. Jealousy, greed, the hunger for an easy life built on someone else's effort. A young officer handed me a file. Inside were bank statements. Sophia had repeatedly withdrawn money under my name from the hotel accounts. There were forged signatures, clumsy strokes but still recognizable. I flipped page after page as if reading a diary of betrayal. Every number, every word, was proof that her treachery wasn't fleeting emotion, but a meticulously prepared plan. During interrogation, Sophia suddenly smirked, lifting her head to glare at Rivera. If Rose hadn't been so ambitious, if she hadn't tried to be the family's star, I wouldn't have had to do this. I only took back what should have been mine. I stepped back as if her words had struck me physically. For years I had sent Sophia money, bought her gifts, hoped she would feel confident. But to her, all of it was proof of the gap between us. Rivera replied firmly, "You didn't take back anything. This was a deliberate murder plot. And you will pay the price." Sophia lowered her head, her shoulders shaking, but I knew it wasn't remorse. It was the bitterness of failure, of everything exposed. I was called in to sign the identification report. When I entered the room, Sophia's eyes met mine. In a flash, her face shifted from rage to shock to a shriveled mask of hatred. What did you do? You trapped us," she screamed. My voice steady, unshaken. "No, Sophia. You and Ethan trapped yourselves. I only survived." Those words left me with a strange relief. No shouting, no cursing. Just the truth, bare and undeniable. Sophia was led away. The click of the handcuffs sounded like the final toll of a dark symphony. I no longer saw the sister I once knew. All that remained was an accomplice who chose betrayal over blood. That evening, I returned to the penthouse, sitting by the window overlooking Lake Michigan. In my hand was Ethan's short letter to Sophia, the ink still smelling fresh. I read it again and again, then sealed it into the case file. It would serve as evidence. Outside the glass, the city lights glowed. Inside me, a faint light had returned. Sophia's trial took place on a crisp autumn morning in Chicago, golden leaves scattering across the courthouse steps. I sat in the victim's section, clutching the small handkerchief my mother had sewn for me years ago. Sophia entered in an orange jumpsuit, her hands cuffed. She was gaunt, her face hollow, her once polished blonde hair greasy and tangled. Her eyes blazed with spite as if trying to burn me alive in the courtroom. The prosecutor began presenting evidence piece by piece. On the screen, the video played. Ethan pulling a vial of clear liquid, pouring it into the soup. Sophia leaning in, giving him a passionate kiss. The images froze the courtroom. Some people shook their heads in disbelief, others sighed. My chest tightened even though I had already watched it many times before. Sophia's defense attorney tried to salvage what he could. He stood, voice firm. "Your Honor, my client was a victim of manipulation. Ethan exploited her weakness, coerced and seduced her. Sophia was only a pawn." But the prosecutor immediately countered, producing emails between Sophia and Ethan, their cold words. "This dose is stronger, she won't survive." Or, "When Rose is on a trip, we can meet freely." Every line, every word, was a dagger proving Sophia wasn't a pawn. She was an active conspirator. When allowed to speak, I stood. My voice trembled, not with fear but with emotion. I tried to lift my sister up, to share success, to share love. What I received in return was betrayal, was a murder plot. I don't come here for hatred. I come here for justice, to prove that envy and greed cannot trample human life. The judge, a stern older woman with a steady voice, brought down her gavel. "This court has reviewed all evidence. Sophia Carter is found guilty of conspiracy to commit murder. Sentence: life in prison without parole." The gavel struck, reverberating through me. Sophia's face drained of color, but she did not crumble. She lifted her head, glaring at me as if etching my image into her mind one last time before being taken away. As police escorted her out, she turned back, her voice sharp. "You may have won this time, but one day you'll know what it feels like to be abandoned by the world. And I'll smile even from the shadows." Her words held no power over me anymore. 6 months after the trial, I finally felt the breath of a normal life returning. My body no longer twisted in pain after meals. My hair grew back thick and strong, as if declaring I had survived the silent poisoning. Each morning, the mirror no longer showed a hollow, anxious woman but a face renewed, not carefree and young as before, but steady, resolute, and full of determination. My hotel business stood firmer than ever. After the shock, I strengthened the management system, tightened financial security. The Chicago, Miami, and Los Angeles properties not only ran smoothly but attracted new investors. Loyal guests kept their trust, employees stood united, perhaps because they saw me endure and rise stronger. Sometimes I thought, maybe that brutal betrayal had forced me to become tougher, to safeguard what I had built. That day, after a meeting at the Chicago hotel, I stepped out. On the steps, Daniela, my best friend and the lawyer who had stood by me through it all, waited. She wore a beige coat, her wavy hair lifted by the breeze. The moment she saw me, she hurried forward, wrapping me in her arms. "Rose, you finally look truly healthy again," her voice thick with emotion. I nodded softly, squeezing her hand. "If it weren't for you, I wouldn't have made it this far. You weren't my lawyer, you were my anchor." Daniela smiled, stepping back to look at me fully. "You stood up on your own. I only walked beside you." We descended the steps together. Ahead, Lake Michigan stretched wide, its waters shimmering in the afternoon sun. I paused, breathing deeply. Memories rushed back. The sleepless nights in pain, the sight of my husband and sister plotting, the sound of the judge's verdict. They were shards of glass, but now they had formed into a picture that taught me my worth. Daniela placed a hand on my shoulder, her gaze gentle but firm. "No one can take away the strength you've found again." A breeze swept by, carrying the lake's salty scent. My chest opened, my breath finally free. That evening, I returned to my penthouse. The house that once held so much darkness had been transformed. I repainted the walls, hung light curtains, placed green plants everywhere. I wanted it to testify to rebirth, not betrayal. I opening a new journal. I had begun writing my story, not to dwell on pain, but to preserve truth and share it with those enduring the same. I believed out there women were still trapped by betrayal and envy in their own families. I wanted them to know, there is a way out of the shadows. Later my phone rang. It was my mother. She said she wanted to visit that weekend, bringing an apple pie like when I was a child. I smiled softly, realizing that despite all I had lost, I still had family, the ones who loved me truly and never betrayed me. Looking back, I understood. Sometimes betrayal comes from those closest, but the pain gives us the chance to find ourselves again. I had lost a husband and a sister, but I still had myself, the strength to move forward, and those who truly loved me. If it were you facing betrayal from blood and spouse, what would you choose? Forgive, let go, or rise and defend your life as I did? I truly want to hear your thoughts. Share them in the comments because every story matters and could be a light for someone else out there. Don't forget to like and subscribe to follow more stories with me about family, trust, betrayal, and the strength to be reborn from the dark.